Welcome, everybody, to the Dark Side of Therapy. I am one of the hosts, Justin, owner of Greater Minnesota Trauma Center, LPCC certified trauma professional, and alongside me we've got Eric Nance, licensed independent clinical social worker, and certified. What does the CPD stand for, Eric? Certified personality disorder person.
You, certified in personality disorder treatment.
Yes, yes, and I do. I say that sort of jokingly. I really the training that Eric did for that. I really am looking forward to doing that someday when I'm not so
Yep.
busy. We are going to talk to you today about private practice and our supervision experience. Um, Two things that they don't really talk to you about in grad school.
No.
They sort of maybe tell you the supervision requirements, but they don't tell you that supervision oftentimes sucks, and they certainly don't tell you how to start a private practice or what it entails or what the hell's the difference between an LLC and a PLLC. Um, so we're going to get into probably all of that, um,
Can't wait.
and
Can't wait.
and yeah. What do you? I'll stop talking. That was a long intro. What do you think, Eric?
No, that was good. Yeah, because now here's the thing. I know other people in media land, YouTube are talking about private practice, but I just think we can do it better. I think we can give people a better, more realistic view of what that looks like. And I think talking about clinical supervision too, because yes, sometimes it just sucks ass. And because you don't have a lot of power, you're kind of stuck with who you get unless you want to go pay for it on your own. And so these are big issues we don't talk about a whole lot. You and
Right.
I don't know how similar our experiences are, but I can't wait to talk about them today. So I've looked forward to this for a long time. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. I will just say I didn't have great. The first half of my supervision was not great. Um, it really wasn't. I
How
don't feel
come?
like I grew as a clinician. I don't feel like I really learned anything other than the CPT codes that you use for billing, right? The 90837s and the 90846s, and you can bill two DAs. Um, all those kinds of things, right? What an EHR was. I learned some of those, which really helped me when I got into private practice. But in terms of a clinician and growing my skills and being challenged and that kind of thing, um, oftentimes, uh, I felt like maybe I was being my clinical supervisor's therapist because of some of the. I mean, really, and
Oh no.
it, and I won't name my previous agency. And if you're watching, I really do hope that you're succeeding. I think that there's room in this world for everybody to succeed, and so I don't mean anything, sort of whatever. But it wasn't a good experience, and I think that that's good feedback, even for an agency to have, right? So that experience was for me was not great. I after grad school, um, I was really wanting to be a therapist, right? Just like everybody. Finally did the master's degree, you graduate. Um, I, I was just ready to start practicing, and so I found this agency. I had known the clinical supervisor in a different capacity, and so they were up actually like an hour and a half away from me, and they gave me the opportunity to open a sort of a satellite here where I'm at in St. Peter. It was
Right.
a great opportunity. I'm blessed for that. Um, and but it just and so they give me this contract, and I'm like, yeah, let me sign my name, whatever, and then you know
Right.
my first month I'm billing however much money, and then I get my paycheck, and I'm like, what? Wait, like my EHR says the EHR says I billed this much, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to drive Uber this weekend because I'm not making, and then I go back to my contract, and it's like, oh, I signed a 40-60 split, meaning you get 60% of what I'm billing. Nobody explained
Right.
that nobody explained
Yeah.
that to me. Not certainly not in grad school, and so that's an honest thing. I really did drive Uber and Lyft. Um,
I had
my
no idea.
my
Wow.
first year as a master's as a clinician, um,
Yeah.
my day job was helping people and listening to them talk about all kinds of things, working with specifically with young kiddos and adolescents with trauma, parents not being able to make ends meet. and telling them, oh, like do this, and then I hear you, and then I was that person at 8 o'clock at night going, I can't make ends meet, and driving around, and I'm just like, I have a master's degree, and nothing against Uber and Lyft drivers, but if I wanted to be an Uber and Lyft driver, I wouldn't have gone spend a shit ton of money on a master's degree,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
To follow. Right. Right. Right.
So it was a 2022, so last year,
Yeah.
um, was a rough year for me, because um, I just wasn't making it. Like I just wasn't. I started with them in 2021. I, I'm gonna get all my dates mixed up. I don't even remember.
Doesn't matter. You know what?
But
It's the material that's good. Keep
but
going.
but last year was rough for my wife and I because we weren't making it. Let me put it this way. I started my private practice this year, like fully launched it first of the year. Sort of started it like the end of last year, but fully launched it the first of the year. I have made more. I made more this year in the first, mm, 5 months, 4 months of the year. So by May, I had made more in private practice than I made all of last year. My
Yeah.
wife and I combined, and part of that was my wife was in nursing school too, and so she was working part time. But um, in 5 months, so when I moved to private practice, or when I told them, I was sort of, because I've learned, but I was really honest with them, and I'm like, yeah, I got this thing on the side. They were not happy about it. They weren't supportive. They
Yeah.
were like, you
Right.
can't take your
Right.
clients with you. You're going to have to
Right.
refer them
Right.
to everywhere else. You can't tell them where you're going. Um, just really these people that were like, oh, we're like a family here, and we support you. By the way, if an employer ever tells you that one of the reasons why you should work for them is because it's like a family, run
Yeah.
for the hills. Don't ever do it. That is one of the biggest red flags. But I so they were not happy about it, and their attitude
Right.
towards me turned real cold. Um, and I was like, I'm just whatever. I'm gonna have to do this. And towards the end, in like December, when I had a conversation with the executive director, and I was like, yeah, I'm because she kept saying we're going to have to make people sign non-compete clause as of the first of the year because that wasn't in my original contract, which was great for me. Um, she's like, but one thing we've learned from this is we have to have everybody sign non-competes, and I was like, oh, of all the
Yeah.
things, that's the thing you learned, like not let's not because it wasn't just me, Eric. Like
Yeah.
prior to me leaving, there were two other clinicians, one that started the organization that left. So three of their best clinicians left all in a time span of 6 months. And the thing that they learned was that they need to make people sign non-competes. Right? That for me was the nail in the coffin. I was like, man, I wish no ill towards this agency, but that's messed up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I left. And by the way, if you're a new clinician or master's student, or even a supervisor, just so you know, in like July of this year, Minnesota. Actually, it might have been on the federal level, but I know for sure in Minnesota, non-competes non-competes are illegal in the state of Minnesota.
I didn't know that. Okay.
It became
That's good to know.
illegal. You cannot put non-competes. I was so happy, and the first thing that came to my mind was, God, I want to forward this because I got an email from the state or something. I was like, man, I want to forward this to my previous agency, but move on. It's water under the bridge.
I,
I got to move on, right? But so in private
I,
practice, I started, and that's been one of the things for me is like I don't ever want any. Yeah, I have a contract with my clinician, and we're just about to hire another part time clinician to do groups. Um, and she's like, you know, because she's only going to be very very part time, and she's not credentialed. She's not on any contracts
okay.
because she works for the state.
Right.
And I said, there's a lot of benefit for you because I'll get you credentialed and all these things. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, if it makes you feel any better, Justin, I'll sign like a 2-year agreement with you. And I'm like, no. Like, I appreciate that. But also, if you don't want to be here, I don't want you to be here. And
Right.
I
Right.
don't ever want anybody that works at the trauma center to feel trapped, which is what I felt there. I felt obligated. And in fact, my clinical supervisor during one meeting that last fall, she literally told me, you're a backstabber. And I was like, ouch, wow, okay, you know.
Ooh.
Followed by then she followed that up with, if you would have just told us from the beginning, we would have supported your private practice. No, you wouldn't.
Mm,
So,
right.
so I won't get into my private practice quite yet because that was a lot, but that was my experience with supervision. And then of course this year, so to sort of wrap that up, this year I was short hours. Like I had been a clinician for 2 years by the end of last year, and in 2 years you should have all your supervision hours needed to be an
Right.
LPCC, right?
Right. 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 Right.
I was already an LPC, an independent LPC, because you only need 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours. Um, you need 4,000 hours before you can even apply for your LPCC. It's kind of weird in Minnesota, but you can apply for your
Yeah.
independent. So for those of you that don't know, because a lot of my colleagues from St. Mary's, where I graduated from, didn't know this. You can take the national exam. So I took the NCMHCE, which is the big one that you need for LPCC. So I took that one right away. It took me 4 tries, by the way. Um, so
I love that you admitted that. Thank you.
that's $1,200 that I donated to Pearson. But it took me 4 tries because it's so by the book, and I'm not a by the book person. And to get into that
Yeah.
by the book
Yeah.
headspace, that's probably a whole
Yep. Yep.
nother episode. Talk about the NCMHCE, um,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
but I took it. So when I had my 2,000 hours or whatever it was, my 100 hours of supervision, um, I sent it into the board. The board's like, hey, you're independent LPC. The only insurances you can't take, like independently, if you went private practice, Medicaid won't, and Medicaid and Medicare won't contract with you. I'm like, are you sure about that? Because everybody's telling me I have to be an LPCC to get insurance. Um, no, the lady at the state, literally the board said, no, you can take insurances. You just can't do Medicaid. So like straight MA, that kind of thing. So I
Okay, hold
didn't.
on. I have to interrupt real quick just because I'm so curious.
Yeah.
So you're saying as an LPCC in Minnesota, you cannot bill or contract with Medicare or Medicaid.
So it's kind of like LAMFT and LMFT. You know, the
Yep. Yep.
LAMFT is sort of the precursor to LMFT. Does that make
Right.
sense? Because I think an
Yes.
LAMFT or like the LGSW as opposed to LICSW.
It's the precursor to the
Yes.
licensure that you can,
So
yeah, contract
so
both with.
I
Yeah.
had after 100 hours of supervision, so 1 year, I had my LPC, and I was deemed independent at that point. And as an
Okay.
LPC, I was in grad school. I was under the impression that didn't mean jack. That I had to have my LPCC, right?
That's what I'd always heard too. Yeah.
But when I
Yeah.
sent my stuff off to the state, I asked her that follow up question because I don't remember where I heard it, and she's like, "Yes, you can bill insurance on your own." And I'm like, and so I emailed our biller at that agency on the side, and I said, "Hey, is this true?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's totally true. You just can't bill MA and Medicaid and Medicare." Oh, cool. She's like, "Yeah, let me know when you're when you're LPC independent, and I'll get you credentialed." Well, I went then back to my clinical supervisor and was like, I want clinical supervision still, but I want you to stop signing my notes. And like, I don't want to have to send you my notes before you, because the process was do my note, I had to send it off, and they don't bill it until my clinical supervisor signs off on it, right?
Correct.
So,
Right.
so I was like, just let me do it. I'm independent now. This is what the state said. Well, I think there's sometimes a disconnect between like LPCCs and LICSWs because it's different
Uh-huh.
boards, right?
It
And so
absolutely. Yes.
she was
Yeah.
on the social work. She was from her, she's an LICSW, and she was like, "No, that's not fair to everybody else that needs clinical supervision." I'm like, "Well, it's not my fault that LGSWs and the board says you can't do it. Like that's not my problem. I have a different board that's allowing me to do something else. Why wouldn't you?" But okay, so she didn't allow me to
Right.
do it. So that's when I went off on my own and started doing my own thing and like credentialing, and it all went through. Um, so when I left in December, I only had like 134 hours of supervision. To be an LPCC, you need 200.
Right.
So I left still needing 66 hours after 2 years. So I had to
Yeah.
find somebody. I had to find somebody and go pay it, out of pocket.
Right.
Which, by the way,
Right.
was significantly cheaper for me to go find somebody and pay out of pocket once I was private practice than my agency going, well, part of that 60% that we keep covers your supervision. Really? How much are you paying my clinical supervisor? Like $300 an hour to supervise me? Because that doesn't add up.
Right.
So I was
Right.
paying this independent clinical supervisor. She's an LMFT, by the way, which um, I have some issues with with not LMFTs, but just sort of the approach. But she was phenomenal. I loved her. She was great. She's very trauma trained, ART trained at accelerated resolution therapy. She was phenomenal.
Yeah.
She challenged me in various different ways. I felt like I grew from January to July, 7 months, 2 hours a week. It was phenomenal. And then I also got to do some group therapy because I found this BIPOC group that I got to do for free. So if you haven't done group therapy, a group supervision, I highly recommend it. And I encourage
Absolutely.
you to do with a BIPOC group if you can, because just like listening to people that work with the Hmong population or whatever, it's fascinating and it's very humbling. So after all that, 2.5 plus years, finally, so as of September 1st, so really not that, like 28 days ago, I finally was an LPCC.
That's
Had enough
awesome.
hours, and so now I can now, and I had my stuff ready for Medicaid, and now I can take straight MA, and that opens up a lot of people, and it's just been a ride, man. It's just been a ride, and um, a learning experience of all the things I don't want to offer my supervisees.
And I want to, and that was really good. And thank you for letting that passion come out because that's really what I love about you. It's confusing stuff, and I'm gonna pick on your board website just for a second because have you ever gone to that thing, Justin? There, it's like opening something in QuickBooks. There are so many categories on that website that I find it a little difficult to navigate. Um, some websites are just inherently, I think, easier to navigate, but this one I found really confusing. Having said that, I'm licensed to supervise LPC
Sure.
candidates for LPCC, so I'll give them credit there because they let LICSWs do it.
Why didn't I
But
find you sooner?
I know, right? I could have made it a much better experience. Here's what I want to say in response to all that. If I had my way, everybody under clinical supervision would have four supervisors, and let me tell you why. Because I think four different perspectives would
Yes.
would would really be easier to deal with than having one person that gives you only their window into what it should look like. I only had one clinical supervisor, Justin, for my, I think it took me 2.5 years. And guess what? It wasn't a clinical person. It was an administrative person who did a lot of DAs, write up, stuff like that.
Sure.
But I never learned how to do like the reflective work that I teach and the
Sure.
supervision that I do. For example, what is it like to sit with this client? What are your fears? What about the clients that affect you in a way where you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. We didn't do any of
Nope.
that. We focused on documentation primarily, how to write really good progress notes, how to write measurable objectives, and that shit's great for a while, but you need to have the other areas too. Okay.
Yeah.
So a few of my supervisees now, they have me for group, they have their direct clinical supervisor, and then they may have somebody else. And I like that because then they can challenge me and say, well, this person said that. And I think that's really good for us because you want to, again, have different experiences and windows. But
Yeah.
if I ran the boards, that's what I would do to give people a much more well-rounded experience. I don't know if they're ever going to say that's a mandate, but I think
Sure.
sticking somebody for 2 years with one supervisor is a dumb idea. I just think it's inherently dumb.
Well, there's a lot of validity to what you're saying. When the amount of just the difference in each one, right? And even outside of this, the amount of supervision I actually did was way above and beyond 200. Because
Oh,
I
of
would
course.
consult,
Yeah.
I would consult all the time with my mentor, who is a PhD
Right.
licensed psychologist, and uh, you know, her personality is very unique, and the way she conceptualizes. I'm hoping to have her on the show at some point. She does
Yes.
neuropsychological evaluations from a trauma
Yes.
perspective, She's
Okay.
older, right? So don't come at me about the ages thing. I'm just saying she's older,
Not
so
at all.
there's a different perspective. Um, there's a 20+ year gap between us, right? So there's that. So there's a difference between her than my clinical supervisor at the agency, who has had her hands in not just clinical work, but more so at like the state level, and policy and things like that, which is a whole other thing. And then
Yeah,
my
right.
and then the
Yeah.
supervisor, the LMFT that I sought out afterwards, doing private practice. She was young like me. She had been through the whole working for an agency and basically doing things for free. She told me this crazy story once, um, that they would draw names every month or so, and if your name was drawn, they would draw two people, and if your name was drawn as a clinician, you had to come in and help the administrative people, and you didn't get paid for this. This was part of just your whatever expectations, and
Wow.
you would have to go through case files and audit them essentially, and you would audit them like the insurance companies would. And so she would go,
Mhm.
we would spend however many hours, and this was part of my training. They said this is part of your supervision, um, and you're going to learn to do this. And I was like, that is hell no. I learned pretty quickly. Like I'm the kind of person like you know I I need to be paid for my work. And when people say, "Oh, but it's not all about the money," yeah, damn right it is. Because the money is what makes the world go round. The money is what makes me feel secure. And if I can't feel secure financially, because if I'm sitting with a client who's telling me all about how mom and dad would beat the crap out of them and invite friends over to do things with them while mom and dad got
Mhm.
high, and I'm listening to somebody tell me that story, but my mind is thinking about, should I go drive Uber at 8, or should I wait till 10 o'clock after my kids are asleep?
Right.
How am I going to be a good clinician? So it is about the money. And so when she was telling me that story, I'm like, we just agencies, not all, but the vast majority of agencies take advantage of new graduates because they don't know any better and they just want to help. They want to do the thing. And this is why, and you know better than I, Eric, because you did a presentation on this, but this
Mhm.
is why they burn out. This is why
Right.
there's a social worker that I work with. I knew her name from somewhere. I'm like, man, I know your name from somewhere. I know. And I finally put two and two together. She used to be a therapist. But you know what? She's no longer a therapist. She went back to work for the county. You know why?
Mhm.
Stability, consistency. She knows what
Yeah.
to expect. So yes. So back to your point, really quick. And then my other supervisor, which was my group supervisor, right?
Mhm.
A person of color. Uh, led group. Man, that was a whole experience of itself. So I
Yeah.
loved having all these experiences. I probably could have done without the one that I'm not too crazy about. Um,
Yeah.
but
But yeah.
but also I can find the goodness out of that, which is what helped me start my private practice. And I don't think without that
Mhm.
experience, I would have been able to launch my private practice as quickly as I did. So yes,
That's a
I
real good
think people
point.
need to have way more than one.
And let me say this too, because I think this is really important for the new clinicians going into an agency with supervision. Your supervision experience needs to be safe, and by safe I mean you need to be able to say anything in that supervision session, anything.
Yeah,
I have some supervisees that will apologize for telling me their point of view, and I say, no, 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 do not apologize for that, because that's the truth. Now, whether that looks attractive, I don't know, but let's not apologize for saying things like, I'm kind of attracted to this person.
sure.
Okay. Because I tell this to the group all the time. We've talked about it. Go to any board website with the infractions. Every state's got like hundreds of infractions, people who screwed up. And I wonder how many of those people, Justin, I'm going to mix this into my next presentation too. They're on that list because they were too damn afraid to ask the question. So they go and screw it up because that's better than saying things like, I'm attracted to a client or I don't want to be in the field anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
I've had supervisees tell me I paid a lot for this and I'm not going to leave the field because I'm so invested. That's a bad
Yes.
reason to stay in this field. I don't care how much money you lose. I saw something the other day too. You'll appreciate this. I don't know if it was a joke or not, but it was this idea that burnout is a rite of passage for therapists. I thought that is the stupidest shit I've ever seen in my life. Is that what this is becoming? Burnout's a rite of passage?
So
Uh,
yeah, no, it's not a rite of passage. That is, let
no.
me just adopt the comments that you just. That is the stupidest thing, and I threw my hands up because you sort of triggered me
Hold on.
there,
Yeah,
because one of the executive director at my previous agency didn't have this conversation with me, and I can't for certain say she said this, but one of my
sure.
colleagues that had been there a while and left prior to me she was really trying to make it work there, and she was really trying to be honest and just say, look, we're not making it. You're not paying us enough. This is not okay. Like, and she texted me after that meeting and she said, you know what I was just told? And I said, I'm not going to be surprised, but please lay it on me. And she said, I was just told that being broke and struggling is a rite of passage. And that someday when I'm making a lot of money, I will appreciate the struggle and how I got there. And and I, I was, I know it's going to surprise you and the viewers. I was at a loss
Yeah,
for words. I was at a loss for words. I was like,
yeah.
and it's a very again, not to, not to be ageist or
Didn't we just say anything goes? Come on, you don't have to preface it.
putting labels on everything, but I know the culture that we live into, and I just, but it is a baby boomer Gen Xer thing. That is a thing that that my parents and my grandparents would say, like, oh, back in the day, we had to lace up our bootstraps and or whatever the stupid saying is, right? Um, and
That's
so it's a
pretty much it.
very older, yeah, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? Yeah, well, here's the thing, what if I can't afford to buy bootstraps? Then what the hell am I supposed to pull up? And so it's there. I'm not a believer, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not a believer in you have to struggle to appreciate what you have. That's bullshit to me. And so burnout is not should not be a rite of passage. We want people in this field that are going to further the mental health field and psychology as a whole. And
Right.
those people that are burning out that never come back to the field, maybe they were the next, whoever, right? Eric Erickson or Freud, or whoever,
Right.
and now they're burnt out.
Um, I want to take what you just said and try to build my context out of it. We'll see if I'm able to pull this off or not. But I
Sure.
think you're right earlier though too when you said that new clinicians they come to agencies and they're abused more or less. I've watched this happen for years. And here's how I define the abuse. I use the line, "Who's got an opening? Let's just give these people to anybody," which is really, again, a very bad model, especially since we
Yeah.
call this a medical model that never works in therapy anyway. But
Right.
I think the amount of damage done is so huge, and it's the one thing I think again we don't talk about very much. Candace and I do in our presentations because guess what? I want you to have the facts. When you work for an agency, by and large, not every agency, you're not going to make very much. And if you
Right.
see the data of what you bring in versus what you're getting paid, there is going to be a huge discrepancy. And
Yep.
sometimes one agency I worked for 20 years ago, they didn't want us to see how much revenue we brought in. Well, no shit, because you're going to show me that I'm only making about 40%. Now, we didn't have a contract like you did, 60/40. It was just you got a base salary and then
Sure.
that was it. Now, as we're talking about this, Justin, money is important to me from the standpoint of in private practice, you can lose money and get harmed very quickly. If you're at an agency, you have kind of the firewall, so to speak, of if clients don't show, you're still going to get paid unless it's egregiously bad. I
Yeah.
think I lost in private practice last year close to 20 grand from money I could not recover from either no shows. Because here's the thing about insurance too. If people don't show, most insurances will not allow you to
Right.
charge the client. There's a
Right.
contractual stipulation there. And so that really sucks.
Yep.
And so for those of you thinking about private practice, here's what you have to know. You can lose a lot of money very, very quickly. So that's the part where I get fired up because I never knew that before until I experienced it. I kind of knew I might lose some here. I didn't know I'd lose that much. And no matter how cohesively you set it up with people and you have that business discussion, which is tough for a therapist sometimes, it still happens. And
Yep.
so if you're thinking about private practice, just know you are the person they're going to come to. You are the person that has to have these very difficult discussions. And it's very hard to say to a client, I'm losing money because of you. I don't recommend you say that, but you do have to say, this is a business. This is a business and it
Yep.
cannot function if you're not there. And I do
Yeah.
say that to people. So that's the part that really gets me thinking when you talk about the finances, because some people that are on the edge of not making it, they can be out of business like that.
Yep.
That is
Well,
just the truth.
but I have said that to clients, and I think
I'm
it's
sure you
okay.
have.
I think it's okay. It's the way you approach it. I mean, come on.
I agree.
Um, you know,
I agree.
people we all struggle with money. Money is this made up bullshit thing that somebody created however long ago and put some kind of value on a piece of stupid green paper, and that apparently buys you anything and everything, right? Money's made up and it's
Yep.
bullshit, but it's something that we all have to struggle with and we all deal with, right?
Right.
And so and I think that that just humanizes you in here, right? Like if I have two no shows by the same client or three no shows, and they're like, oh man, I really want to come in. Yeah, you let them come in and you say, look, before we even get into the session, um, I just want to let you know that if I'm going to keep you on the schedule because I have a long wait list, but I do care about you, and so if I'm going to keep you on the schedule, though, I need you to commit to coming every week because not only does it take up a spot that somebody else could be having to work on, but as much
Right.
as I enjoy doing this and working with clients and helping people, I don't like to do it for free. And when you don't show, I don't get paid. And you know what? A lot of clients take that okay, um, because I think most clients don't realize you don't get paid. I don't think clients realize
Right.
you don't get paid if they don't show up. And so
I think you're probably right.
I have not had any real how dare you say that you're just trying to make money and like you're a therapist, you should be doing this because you just love. I've never had that. I think
No,
people really get it. So it's about how you approach it. Again, I've said this in other episodes. It's about how you approach it. But I would say it's think about how you want to say it, um, and also be really clear too in your paperwork. That's one thing that I've not been
right.
good because I launched my private practice so
Oh,
fast.
shame on you.
Yeah, and we've revamped it. And you know what? For the people that have been with me for a while, when we rolled out some of this new stuff in the paperwork and I had them sign it, they were like, "Whoa, where did this come from?" And I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
get over it. You can either
Hmm.
sign this or I can't continue to see you. And good luck with the 6 to 9 month wait list." Of course, I didn't say that, but you have to
Thank
know your
God.
worth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to know your worth, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Right. Um, I like where this is going, and yet let's go to the positive really quick about private
Sure.
practice. I'm going to tell you something I enjoy about it, and I'd like
Yeah.
to hear from you because we've never talked about this off camera. My favorite thing about private practice is the control that I have. I like that I
Yes.
get to be in control of all these elements that I never was in control of before in an agency, and I like that there's a real freedom in not having to answer to a hierarchy of an agency. You
Yep.
set the rules and the value system, and that's pretty neat. And I like seeing my big logo in my office. Like, wow, that's awesome. So that's one of the cool things about it. The other cool thing about it is you get to track your finances in a way that I had never seen before. I never had to worry about checking accounts to the extent I have to now, and QuickBooks and all that. But I'm really glad I got to learn some skills that I wouldn't have had before.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to go into private practice because the billing is so difficult, these things. Well, of course it's difficult, but you can learn it. If
Yeah.
you're willing to look stupid, and I am, you can get through credentialing and learn about insurance and all these different
Yep.
things. So I've come to embrace the learning because there's a lot of people that have no idea about their own billing as clients. And I
Yep.
think a lot of therapists have no idea how this stuff works, but there's a real
Yep.
education to be had there. And I'm happy about that. I'm glad I've learned how that works. So I can at least talk about it semi-intelligently. Where 3 years ago, I didn't have a freaking clue. I didn't know what billers did. I'm like, what do you do all day? Let me eat my words, Justin,
it
and
is
just
a
kick my own ass.
it is a full-time job.
Yes.
It is a full-time job. I mean, my office
Yeah.
assistant, I only pay her for 10 hours a week. That's all I can afford right now. Yeah, as we bring
Yeah.
on more clinicians, we'll be able to give her more hours. But those
Yeah.
10 hours, that's nothing. If I ask her to do one thing with insurance, I better not ask her to do anything else this week because that will eat up her
Mm,
10 hours. So you're right. I think if I could do one thing or change one thing about master's programs for social workers, LPCCs, whatever, it would be that it would, at the very least, that there would be an elective that talks all about private practice and insurance and
yes.
what's the difference between a limited liability company or a PLLC or a nonprofit or
An
all
S
those
corp.
kinds of an S corp. Yes,
Yeah.
which I'll do
Yeah.
that next year. I think I don't even. That's just one thing that I can't even right now. But yeah,
Sure.
like
I get it. I get it.
my clinical supervisor from this year that I love, she says, yeah, by the way, I went to my tax person, and I'm an employee of my LLC. And I said, you can do that? And she's like, yeah, that's called an S corp. And I was like, that what? And so I went to Google right away, of course, and reading the difference between S corp and C corp, and yes, and then I started following these pages on Facebook, and they're like, yes, you have your LLC, and you can make yourself an employee,
Yes.
so that you're taxed differently, and you're getting your taxes taken out and all the kind of things. That way, you don't have to do like at the end of the year or whatever quarterly tax, those kind of things. It's a whole thing, and it's better, so they say. So I'll look into it for next year. But
Can I butt in for one
yeah, yeah,
second though
yeah,
to give
yeah.
you the downside of it? I didn't know we would talk about our LLCs and stuff today, but so I plan to move to Minnesota next year. I told you that, but I'm really excited to sell my house. Well, here's the problem with being an S corp. Okay, your tax return is not going to reflect how much you're bringing in as an employee of your company. So I have heard it's infinitely more complicated to
Sure.
buy a house because your income is very different when you have an S corp. It can still be done, but just for those of you going to choose the S corp, there are going to be some challenges if you try to sell your house. So that
Mm,
could be a little more. I think in today's day and age, though, they'll give a house to anybody anyway. But just to be thinking about that, and it does save
interesting.
a lot of money, Justin. I mean, it's the tax break you get is so worth it. So, but we could do a whole
Yeah.
episode about S corps and C corps as well. And I don't know everything there is to know, but I know an S corp is usually a pretty good idea financially for
But those are
folks.
the things, Eric, that you don't learn about when you want to do private practice. You just think people
No.
think people are in grad school and they think, man, I want to have. I don't know how many times in my master's program and when I was going to the university for my PsyD, did I
Yep.
hear, when I grow up, I want to have my own private practice? Like, okay, great. And do what with it? And do you know how difficult it is to start a private practice and to
Uh-huh.
maintain that private practice? And did you know that you might go a few months without any income while you're building up a client base? And
Yep.
do you know that when you're networking is and you schedule a meeting and have a meeting and then you schedule 10 more meetings, do you know you don't get paid for any of that? Like
Yeah.
on and on and on. I will say, um, on the positive side, because that's what you asked for. Yeah,
I knew
yeah.
you'd get there.
I have so much more control of my life, and also because I'm a business owner and I'm running this thing, I don't.
Yes.
There's a whole new business thing to small business thing to it, but I do. I mean, for example, it's been a rough few weeks, and my kid was sick, and then I was sick, and my wife, and just and somebody bought our building, and I might not have this building, and might have to like go find
Oh,
another
really?
place. It's just
Oh
been a
my God.
whirlwind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this weekend because my wife's birthday was on Tuesday. Our 7 year anniversary is on Sunday, and yeah, and thank you. And so I've been looking forward to this weekend because the kids are going to her parents tonight, and then tomorrow they're going to my parents. We have the whole weekend, and we got some stuff planned, and I've been looking forward to it. And
That's great.
so I sort of had to switch things around because my wife's birthday was on Tuesday, and so I was gonna have to work late yesterday, and then after my 11 o'clock client was done, I went to lunch and I was like, I'm done. I'm tapped. I don't want to. Nope. And I looked at my schedule and the clients that I had, they're not like one of them is like an every other week kind of person. The other two, when they come, they've been pretty good. So I felt okay with that. So I was like, hey, like I'm gonna have to cancel. And they were like, okay, great, have a great weekend. And then I don't see clients on Friday, and it's been the most amazing thing. My new clinician, she started with me in June. She worked for a residential treatment facility, and that first month, she's like, Justin, next week I'm gonna have to reschedule my Thursday clients, and I emailed her back and I said, Darian, I don't give a crap. Like, don't tell me. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Like, that's the beauty of a private
Yeah.
practice. The downside, because although I'm can be positive, I'm also a
There's one.
realist.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
The downside of that is I missed out on, 3, 4, $500, whatever it is, when you cancel clients.
Yep.
I don't bill them. So, but you figure it out. Like, oh, okay, next week I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to load up on clients this week, or I'm going to see like that every other week person. I just met with him last week. Let's see. Right. And you want to do it ethically, of course, but you learn how to sort of, you're like, hey, I'm going on vacation. Can I see you 2 times this week instead of one? I'm not saying that, um, but
No,
you
I get it. Yeah.
learn how to sort of navigate that, and that's the beauty of having control over that. I can take time off, and I don't have to answer to anybody other than my clients, which is a whole nother thing. You feel guilty canceling your client. They're almost like your boss, right? Like
Well,
you have to come up with
yeah.
some stupid excuse, and for the most part, your clients are like, I didn't want to come today anyways.
Yeah. A lot happen. Although I've also been bit in the butt where I canceled and this gentleman said, "Oh, I'm nice that you showed up today." So I've had it that side too, where they get a little pissed at you.
Yeah,
But here's the
yeah,
thing. Uh, when I got set up in my private practice, let me just give you my journey, okay? So I was working in Minnesota, telehealth, but in North Dakota. Okay.
sure,
So working for an agency, telehealth. When I went into private practice, I realized, well, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to see Minnesota people still, but I'm going to see North Dakota people here. So I have an LLC that is in Minnesota primarily, but I have a what they call a foreign business in North Dakota. That's what they call it, a foreign. I forget the other name. Well, just foreign licensed, whatever. So the state I'm actually in is the foreign part, and the main
sure,
office
yeah,
is in Minnesota. Try figuring that out because that's just the way it worked out. Because I got my business started over there. Foreign
sure,
entity, that's the word. So I'm a foreign entity here.
sure.
Now,
Okay.
here's what's also really interesting. If you do private practice and you do telehealth and you're in two different states, you're going to find some really interesting billing things that come up. So, let me
Yeah.
tell you a quick story. I'm not going to name the insurance companies out of respect, but three of them I had to become credentialed on the North Dakota side because they did not have they weren't in the same neighborhood, so to speak, where you could bill out of state. So I actually bill for
Mm.
Minnesota the insurance company in North Dakota, and somehow they make it all work and I get paid. But it's a weird, complicated process. And that's the part where, again, if you're doing multiple states, that can throw people off. Because I kept
Yeah.
trying to get credentialed with Minnesota. I'm like, why aren't you letting me through? They're like, dude, you don't live in this state. So the form just blocked me out. They said, no, you've got to go through North Dakota, but they're not in North Dakota. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So that would be an interesting thing you have to contend with. The other big thing is when you say, I want to go into private practice, right? I just want to jump right in. You got to get credentialed first with insurance companies, and that can take time.
Yes.
The longest one took me a year. And it
Wow.
wasn't that I did anything
Wow.
wrong. That's how long it took. The quickest was about 2 weeks. Okay. So unless you're ready to go and you have your private pay clients ready, most people won't. You got to give yourself a good 6 months even to get credentialed,
Yeah.
which means paneled with an insurance company so they will pay you.
Yeah.
One of the applications took me 5 freaking times to get through it, Justin.
Sure.
5 times, because I would miss a small detail there, like my bank phone number. And then when they send it back to you, they make you do the whole thing again. It's not just one little detail. And so that can be extremely frustrating. So just know that's one of the real hurdles that you will face is just getting in network with
And
these insurance companies.
you have to re-credential too every once in a while, don't you?
You do have to re-credential, yeah, about every 3 years or so with most companies, yeah.
Yeah, well, that makes me feel good because when the information that so when I log into my the credentialing website, I think it's like the Minnesota Credentialing Collaborative or FCC website. Um,
Yeah, yep, yep, yep,
they,
yep, yep.
maybe I don't even want to say this because the insurance companies are going to come after me after watching this. But there's so much information I got to update on there. I mean, it's all
Yeah,
updated with the insurance companies in my contracts, right? But in terms of
right, right,
credentialing,
right.
I'm looking at that like, whoo, I'm glad you said like 3 years. But I'm
Yep,
gonna have
yep,
to get I'll probably pay a biller to do it for me because it's just so time consuming. But yes, mine
right.
went pretty quick. The credentialing went actually really quick, I would say. Well, the
That's
whole
awesome.
process for credentialing and contracting took me about 5 months. When I brought on my
For
clinician,
every insurance company, I'm sorry to cut you off. For every insurance company you applied for, the sum total was 5 months.
yeah, yeah.
Pretty good.
Um,
Okay, yeah,
and so, just so, and correct me if I'm wrong, but just so our viewers know, what is credentialing? What is contracting? Well, you have
mhm,
to credential first. So when you are an LICSW or an LPCC or a licensed psychologist, whatever your independent license is, right? Your state, so Minnesota in particular, you go to the Minnesota col- uh, uh, Credentialing Collaborative or whatever it is, and the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
MCC website. You sign up on there. You got to fill out all your information, and it's actually pretty slick once you got all your information in, because then you can submit it and you can select all the insurance companies, right? And you send it
Right,
off to all the insurance companies, and then the insurance companies look it over and make sure that your license and all that stuff matches, right? And then they go, okay,
right,
great,
right,
you're credentialed. That doesn't mean you can start seeing clients because now that you're credentialed, that's just sort of saying, yeah, you meet the eligibility criteria to get a contract with insurance companies. So then
right, right.
once you're credentialed, you then have to contact or go on all the websites, right? Which is a pain in the butt. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and you got to fill out the information to get a contract, and then the contract takes
Yes,
time, and literally
yes,
anytime anything changes, so even okay, so then you get your contract, but every time something changes, even small, like I moved down half a block, less than half a block, my address is the same, like it other than it moved from 108 South Avenue to 208 South Avenue. You have to change that, and you can't bill. And most contracts say 45 days, 45 days to do that ad or that change. So you got to get creative. You got to be prepared, because if the insurance companies find out that you were working at 208 but you were billing under 108, you're in trouble. They don't give
right.
a crap. They're called clawbacks. They'll take their money back. They like,
Yeah,
and I think that's a creative word because like
yeah,
like like insurance companies literally have claws. Like you can feel them just digging at you, like, give me my money back. But they'll take it back. So credentialing and then contracting. And then once you have those contracts, I mean, things are pretty smooth for the most part. I mean, when I added my clinician in June, most contracts, if you were already like, I don't know, there's like a, even if you're not credentialed, they tend to add them to the contract because you already have it with them. That's something I've been finding out. But you still have to get credentialed in general. So it's just a whole thing. And it needs to be a smoother process. But that's a barrier
Yes.
to starting your private practice. It's a
No.
barrier.
I think that opens up a really wonderful path for somebody that really is passionate about teaching people to get into private practice. I don't see a lot of trainings about that, but certainly I think that would be helpful. I had some help in the beginning because I was going to do a group practice, and then I said, screw it, I want to be on my own completely. And then
Sure.
so I learned a lot of this on my own, applying for these applications and then getting rejected and then finally having them go through. But I recommend people do it, Justin, because it's a good learning experience. And
Yeah.
to throw one more word out there, because I like how you broke this down from credentialed to contracted to being magical in network. Okay.
Hmm.
In network. Now, I don't know, I would go here, but just because we're talking about the dark side of private practice now, you need to make sure that your client is in your network because this
Yeah.
can go bad very quickly. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's say an insurance is called Blue Ocean. You say, contracted with Blue Ocean. Client says, I've got Blue Ocean. Well, they come in and you're billing, it's 4 or 5 weeks in, you're not getting paid. And Blue Ocean's usually a pretty good turnaround. And then you call them up, you realize what's wrong. Well, there's a Medicaid version of Blue Ocean that you didn't know about and the client didn't know about. Guess what? You're screwed
Hmm.
until you become contracted with them. That may take some time. So those are the situations, Justin, I didn't anticipate when a client says, yes, I have this. So word of advice for new people in private practice, call them yourself and call as many freaking times as you need to because you don't want to be 6, 7 sessions in because you can lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
And without blaming anybody, clients don't know this stuff. Okay.
Right.
So proceed with caution.
And most insurance companies, I mean, when you first start your private practice, unless you got, have a crap ton of money saved up and you can afford a biller and all those kinds of um, support staff, you're not
Right.
only a therapist and a business owner, you're also your own administrative assistant, you're also your own biller, you're
Right.
also, so
Right. Right.
you're doing all those things that take up a lot of time. I mean, certainly you'll eventually get paid, but it's not like you're getting paid hourly, right? So it's a different way of
Okay.
looking at it, but
Yeah. Yep.
but
Yep.
so I spend much of my time, not anymore, but when I first started spending a lot of my time going on like Availity, for example. Availity is sort of this, I don't even know how you want to explain it, like third party sort of thing, that portal thing for like Blue Cross Blue Shield and all those
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And you
Yep.
can go in there, you'll get a portal, you'll get access to that, you can go in there, and as long as you have like your client's insurance information, you can look them up. And when you enter it, all their info, and it turns green, that usually means they're in network for you, right?
Right. 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 Right.
The UCare portal here has been sort of the simplest for me. But even sometimes those things are wrong, or there's something we missed, or what's really cool about those portals too is you can sort of see the deductibles and have they met their deductibles, and so you can sort of share that with them. And but that's
Yes.
time consuming. It's so time
It
consuming.
is. It is.
So
And let me address that too. So I'm independent private practice, which means yeah, I'm the therapist, business owner, biller, administrator. I think for one person that's doable. I think if I had a staff of 2 or 3, there's no way. So that's something to consider too.
yeah,
If you're a one person show, it's certainly doable, but you're right, a lot of unpaid work that you do. But as you
yep,
grow, I just can't imagine being accountable for other, people that are billing and doing. I just can't even imagine that. So but as a one person show, yeah, it's doable if you want to do it.
yeah.
Okay. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But if you want to do it, of course.
And you can get there. I mean, I think about like my mentor, who's a licensed psychologist. I mean, it's just her, and she didn't start out right away with an administrative assistant, but she's had one for quite some years now, and she loses a lot of money, because she appreciates her administrative assistant. Her um, works from home and works whatever hours for the most part. Um, she has a lot of daytime hours because that's what's needed, but she
Right.
pays her a lot of money because she really believes in paying people what they're worth. She also just really respects what she does, and she will often tell me, Justin, without my administrative assistant, my practice doesn't run because
Yeah.
because because of all of the insurance things and all of the fielding phone calls from social workers and referrals and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, she's a life psychologist that does neuropsychs. That brings in a lot of money. But when you look at the salary she pays her administrative assistant, that's a lot of money she's losing. So,
Yeah.
you
Uh-huh.
you get there and you have to decide what's worth it, what's not.
Yep.
Do
Yep.
I want to spend 20 hours a week on fielding these phone calls and dealing with insurance companies on top of my clinical work, or do I want to spend the money to have somebody else do it for me? I will tell you that I help my clinician, my other full time clinician, get credentialed and contracted. Um, our administrative assistant helped a little bit, but again, she only has 10 hours.
Right.
The lady I'm hiring very part time to do some group work. I We had run into an issue with my other clinician with blue. Well, I won't say their name. With well, let's see, how can I put this? With Yellow X, Yellow Sword. We
There
call them
we
Yellow
go. Just change the name and you're good.
Yellow Yellow X, Yellow Sword.
There we go.
One of the bigger ones, and I had to reach out. I found this biller up in the Woodbury area, and she was
Yep.
great. She didn't overcharge. She was phenomenal. She helped us through that. It was great. Well, money well spent. So then I am gonna hire this lady, and I was talking to Darian, and I'm like, Darian, I don't want to do it. I don't effing want to go through that process again because I'm not even sure that I did hers correctly. Like, like eventually I got there, but I feel like I
Yeah.
probably did
Yeah.
more work than was needed. So I reached out to this biller and I'm like, hey, I have this new person. Can you help me with credentialing? She's like, sure. Can you have her fill this out? She gives me this beautiful template of all the things she needs. I'm like, she knows what she's doing. It is so
Right.
worth every dollar, every penny that I'm about to spend. And so you as a private practice person have to figure that out. And sometimes it's just worth it to spend the money. I'm just gonna have to see a few more clients, I guess, this month. I
Um, it really comes down to the priority, you're right, of what
yeah,
you want. Do you want an easier life? Do you want to make more money? I mean, all these things you have to consider.
yeah,
I kind of go back to the I like to learn stuff. And so for
yeah,
me, the sacrifice is worth it because then I can talk to people much more intelligently than I could a couple of years ago without knowing everything.
sure,
But I have talked to more insurance people on the phone in the last year than I've talked to in my entire life. And let me
yep,
just say one kind of final thing about dealing with them. There is a wide variety of insurance people with that headset on that you talk to, from the profoundly awesome and intelligent to the absolute bottom rung of people I've ever talked to.
yep,
And the interesting thing is, Justin, is you're calling them all for the same reason. Why didn't I get paid? Where's the claim at? And
hmm,
it's interesting the spectrum that is there. And I approach them all the same way. I'm kind. I have my MPI ready. Couple notes too. Have your MPI ready when you call. Have the client's insurance number ready, date of birth, date of service. Have all that stuff immediately ready because you want to have that, and your tax ID too. But the other day I got someone who was so wonderful, Justin. I actually said to her, "You just made my day by being an insurance representative that listened to me, validated me, and actually understood what I was saying." So I really try to give some love to the ones that do an amazing job.
yeah,
But
yep,
that I think is the exception in the insurance field. So that's all I wanted to say.
yeah. Insurance. I love my colleagues that are private pay, no insurance contracted clinicians. I love them to death. At
Yep.
times, I envy that model. You know, it's possible for clients to still get insurance to cover even private pay out of pocket. You do. I think it's called like a super bill or
A
whatever.
super bill,
You
yeah.
know, they
Mhm.
clinicians can print out the bills, and it falls under most insurance or every insurance has your in network deductible, and then you have an out of network deductible, which is usually asinine millionaire kind
Right.
of deductibles, right? But
Huge,
but
big stuff. Right.
yeah,
Right.
but if you happen to have a lower deductible or whatever out of network, oftentimes you can go see a private pay person, give them whatever their fee is, and you get a bill or a receipt or whatever, and you can submit that to your insurance companies, right? So it's doable,
Right.
but the population that I work with in particular,
Yeah.
it's not private pay. It's not. And so
Right.
the demographics of my practice would look drastically different if I switched to private pay. So
Um,
private pay works for a lot. I think as I'm getting more into this, and I've only been in private practice for a year, but I'm already like, man, I think I'm going to switch from working with children and adolescents and trauma, and I think I want to do sex therapy. Um, uh, Sex therapy. Have met a person. She charges $336 for an 80-minute session out of pocket.
oh,
These are
oh,
not. These are people who have the money, but it's lucrative for her. And I happen to enjoy people who are
yeah,
struggling with their sex lives. Like that's just a sort of a
absolutely.
sub interest of mine.
Now, why we're all laughing because it's sex, but seriously, that is a huge niche that probably not enough people look into. And I think in our field, it kind of becomes that like, well, yeah, porn addiction's a huge one that I think people don't capitalize on. This is a huge problem. Well, any addiction
Yeah,
is, but it's these little things. But the bigger overall problem, though, I think, is that to truly be private pay with every single client being a private pay client, you need to be in an area that's going to support that. And I don't think I live in an area where I could see all private pay
right,
clients.
right.
But if you were
Same.
in San Francisco, New York,
Yep,
DC maybe. So I do think where you live has a lot to do with it. And
yep.
probably ethically, and you can call me out on this, I don't want to just see rich people. I believe mental health needs to be for anybody that needs it. And yeah, do I take a hit when I bill Medicare? There, I just said it. Yeah, huge hit. But I enjoy the clients and they have a right to be here. It's not their
Yeah,
fault. Their insurance company doesn't pay as well.
it's a very different breed. I mean, and I also don't mean this in a bad way, but I have a colleague who is a psychologist, and she says that she prefers to work with people who are of lower socioeconomic status because they are grateful for the information they're getting. They're grateful for the expertise. A lot of them take
Right.
notes, when she's giving feedback.
Yeah.
Whereas she says, I get a lot of when I get my upper, yeah, when I get my upper middle class people,
Yeah.
she goes, it's a lot of entitlement and a lot
Mm.
of like you know, she's like, I find it very difficult to work with them, and I have to be extra aware of what I'm saying and my professionalism, and so it's a different breed. Not that those people don't deserve care,
Interesting.
but that's her observation, and maybe that's not the observation of other people. But um, I
Yeah.
I do want to say just two things. I know we're sort of getting to the end here, so I want to sort of backtrack
No, this
really
is
quick.
great. Yeah,
One,
please.
for supervision. Um, it's as a new grad, you may not always get your pick of your supervisor. Depending on like if you go to a certain agency or whatever, what they have is what you get sometimes, right? But supervision is important, and if you don't have the right supervisor, burnout is big. And here's the other thing that I want to be very clear about. I saw somebody
Yep.
once say this. I follow this private practice person on Instagram, and she talked about dual relationships. We all know
Mm.
about dual relationships, but did you know you can have a dual relationship with your clinical supervisor? For example, my clinical supervisor was not just my clinical supervisor when I worked for the agency. She also had a say on the management team. So she had a say in what we were making, on if we were going to be 1099 contractors versus employees. Do we get benefits or not? That is a dual relationship. You should, in my opinion, uh, your
Okay.
clinical supervisor should be there specifically for your clinical work. Um, so that's what I'll say about that. Uh, for private practice, in general, right? You have to be fully licensed. Um, you have to then get credentialed. You then have to get your contracts, right? Um, and you have to file your, and before that, you have to file your LLC or whatever you're going to file, your
Right.
PLLC. You have to file that with your
Yep.
state, and every state looks a little bit different. So you have to file those articles. Then you do your contracting. Then you do, or your credentialing. Then you do your contracting, right? And then everything else sort of falls into place. But you have to have all that. You have to have your
Right.
liability insurance, and a lot of companies require that you have a business policy on top of
Right.
your individual liability insurance. So there's a lot of
Right.
things that are requirements, and it's spendy. The upstart of these things are expensive. I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing private practice. I think I will never go back to working for anybody ever again. I will never do it.
Yeah.
But it's a struggle. It can be a struggle. But there are, I think, so many more positive things about private practice.
I totally agree. Let me just piggyback off that really quickly. So the expenses that you incur in private practice, okay, guess what? You got to pay for your own insurance, you got to pay for your space, you got to pay for your internet, you have to pay for your credentialing, you have to pay for all the trainings, the CEUs that you get. I mean, there's a whole slew of expenses you didn't have to pay for at an agency that you're now responsible, and it's all deductible, of course, but these are things you have to now pay. And so as you jump into it, just be very mindful that oh, and then yeah, when you go on vacation, you don't get vacation time to burn to get paid. That's just a loss. So just be very aware. Now, let me just throw one more thing out there. People ask me, do you make more in private practice? Yeah, I
I
absolutely
do,
a
by
lot more.
far.
Yeah, yep. So I just want to say that relative to supervision, here's my final shot there. Do not settle for a supervisor that does not make you feel safe. Do not settle for a supervisor that you can't be critical of. And my third thing is don't settle for a supervisor who will not be vulnerable and who says to you things like, I would never let you watch me in a session, because I think that reveals a real defect in confidence in being able to be critiqued. You need to have a supervisor you can talk to like a human being. Okay.
Yep,
And I'm very transparent with my supervisees. Uh, I think Justin supervision should be held at such a high standard, and we don't have a lot of good supervisors out there. You and I know that. But if I could change one thing in this field, I would make supervision of the highest quality for everybody that had to do it, because I think a lot goes into it. So that's my final supervision shot. Private practice, I'm like you, I wouldn't trade it for a thing. It does get lonely. I have lots of friends in the field, so I can at least talk with them. But I look around, I'm at my home office today, but it's like I got nobody. I used to
yeah,
have friends down the hall. It's like I could staff cases. But if
yep,
you're truly independently on your own private practice, you're a bit different to me. You've got people. It can be very lonely. And you screw up, it's coming on you, just like the insurance stuff you talked about.
yep, yep.
I haven't been audited yet, but every progress note that you write
Ha,
that is submitted to an insurance, or I should say, is billed, that insurance company can look at that note and say, you didn't justify that treatment. And that money is also all recoverable. I think most insurance companies, the audits I've been through, they first put you on like a plan. It's sort of like a fix it plan, but they can come and take away 20 grand just like that if they
yep,
deem that your work is not justifying the diagnosis. So I just wanted to say those final two things, not to scare anybody, because I don't want to work scared. And if they come in and say my notes aren't up to snuff, okay, I'll do better next time. Okay.
yep,
But those things can happen. And so there are risks that you just have to incur
yep,
in private practice.
yep. I agree. And we need more people in private practice.
We do.
Um, I think, I mean, nothing against agencies, and I mean that's what I'm building. I'm building an agency, right? But I do think that people going into private practice, um, they're free thinkers. You have more of the ability to be a free thinker and that kind of thing. And then there's of course people that should not be in private practice. But those are the people that think they know everything and they just do their CEUs
Right.
just to do their CEUs. You are never done learning, and so just
Never.
because you're a supervisor doesn't mean you know everything. And sometimes
Correct.
the supervisee can teach the supervisor something, and if you as a supervisor
Yes.
don't believe that, then you shouldn't be a supervisor. So
I agree. I agree.
yeah, know your worth. As a new grad, you are not just a new grad, right? You did the work in graduate school. You did, you know, um, 10-month practicum or field experience.
Just
You may
about.
not be, I may not be as experienced as Eric over here, but you have to know your worth. And just because you're new in the field does not give anybody the right to take advantage of you.
And I totally agree. And I have supervisees that are your age, and I I think when I was younger, I sort of had this idea. Well, I've got the control now. I can destroy your entire career. I can. It doesn't work like that. And if you are a supervisor that's trying to harm the people you supervise, get the hell out. Because I don't want to break their spirits, Justin. I want to. The reason they come to me is because I listen, and I
Yeah,
really try to figure out what the problem is. And
yeah,
and yeah, without going the whole generation thing, let's just get away from that for a second. This field makes people suffer, and that's the bottom line. And
yeah,
I want to be there to intercept some of that. I told the supervisee the other day, I said, "You're human." What a thing to tell somebody, "You're human."
yeah.
So I'll end on that note. I'll go and do the outro since you got us here. Justin, thank you. This might be my favorite episode we've done because it was just fun to do some personal examples and just wonderful to share the transparency that I think you and I really promote. So just thank you, my friend, for everything you shared. It's very, very valuable.
Yeah, it's always good to do this with you, Eric. By the way,
Uh,
my Cowboys got their butts whooped, so I'm not going to say how about them Cowboys this week. But
Yeah, and you shouldn't. However, my Oregon Ducks put the throttle on the Colorado Buffaloes. I know you're
hey,
not a
hey,
college
hey,
fan.
Coach Prime will get you next time. Okay, don't be dogging on Coach Prime. He's coming for you.
Justin, they got to play USC tomorrow. It's feel like a murder.
All right,
But
okay, I'll end on this. Uh, Usher is playing the Super Bowl halftime show, and if anybody knows anything about me, it's that I have been a lifelong Usher fan. And so when I found that news out 2 days ago, I was reading it. My wife's like, "Are you crying?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not crying." So that's what I'm going to leave you with, that excitement. And he's playing at the Super Bowl, and then a week later, he's dropping his ninth studio album. So watch for it.
okay, so that's a nice shout out to Usher. Thank you. As always, like, comment, subscribe. And if you want any advice from Justin and I on private practice, you want to pick our brains or point out what we're missing, leave a comment. As always, we're open to it, but we want to help you any way we can. And if you have any supervision issues, things you're struggling with, we'd love to hear about that too, because as we both said, we want you to have the best quality experience. So, Justin, thank you much. We will see you next time.